All right, we're back. And in today's video, and I haven't made one for about a week plus already, we're going to start talking about this book right here, which is The Foundations of Mindfulness by Eric Harrison. And the title of the book is actually quite a thing, because Foundations of Mindfulness is the translation of the scriptures written by the Buddha on mindfulness. So what is known as the Satipatthana Sutta. I hope I said that right. And the book is not only a treatise on mindfulness, a modern treatise on mindfulness, but also it offers a new translation, perhaps the newest and most easy to understand and accurate translation of the scriptures of the Buddha regarding mindfulness. There's scriptures about from the Buddha regarding a number of other topics, but this part of the sutta contains really what it's all about, mindfulness. And I think the author did a very good job at that. I think he also did a very good job at describing what mindfulness is and how to best practice it. So I'm going to go into a little bit of that today. He also goes into some interesting critique about the modern idea of what mindfulness is or should be, and I think I'm going to make a separate video about that. And there are some things he goes into in disagreeing with the Buddha or criticizing Buddhism that I think might be a little bit well, I don't necessarily agree with them, but I don't think it takes away from what is a really great book and has a lot of good content. So in today's video, I thought I'd do a couple of things. One of them is help define what mindfulness is according to the author, and he describes it in a very peculiar way or a very particular way, so I thought I'd share that. So I'm going to read it straight away and we can get into it. So he says, to be mindful means to hold a thought or idea in mind, to hold it still without elaboration, and to hold it as a clear and distinct image or mental representation. This feeling of holding something in the spotlight and holding it separate from everything else is quite unmistakable once you get it. So, once again, to be mindful is to hold a thought or idea in mind, holding it still without elaboration, holding a clear and distinct image. It is holding it in the spotlight and holding it separate from everything else. And so he says that it is kind of a feeling that you have when you're holding something in mind like that, all right? And now he talks about holding something in mind, and that is interesting because it is already different from what modern mindfulness says, which is just to be alert and see everything coming and going and passing by. And the reason for that is because in the definition of the Buddha, being mindful is not just being aware of any old random thing, but learning how to hold focus. And so this is where we go into a very interesting and valuable tool or distinction, if you will, that is made by the author, which is, he says that meditation almost always involves both focusing and monitoring, and this is very, very important because they both have value, but they support one another. Okay, and so take for example the classic meditation advice on how to do it, which is to focus on your breath, on the sensation of the breath, either on the nose or as it goes, back down here, or as it goes into the chest and how it moves your chest or even your belly, wherever you feel it the most. Normally, I recommend starting with the nose and focusing on the sensation of the breath as it hits your your nostrils, or the inside, or maybe the edge of the nostril, or maybe this bit right here in the middle. That's the one I use personally. As it comes in and as it goes out, it creates a little sensation of air pressure and friction, maybe a little change in temperature. And so you're supposed to be focusing on that. And then your awareness is going to shift away from it. And your task is to bring your attention back to the breath whenever it shifts. However, when you are especially when you are starting to meditate, what's going to happen is your awareness is going to shift. You're not going to notice that shift, and you're going to spend minutes daydreaming and being totally distracted, only to remember, oh, by the way, I was meditating. And then maybe even then you don't have the mind power to bring it back to the breath. And so that's when so you're trying to create focus and hold focus. But see, what tends to happen is when your focus is way too narrow, you suddenly find yourself in this little tunnel, and then a different thought or some kind of distraction creeps into that tunnel, and then you are distracted. You are daydreaming, but because you are in that tunnel, one thing has replaced another, and you haven't noticed because you were here. So suppose that you were focusing on the breath, so now you're totally here. Something in slowly kind of creeps in, and so now you're daydreaming, but you're daydreaming still in that sort of very narrow view of things. So you have lost awareness. You have sacrificed awareness for the sake of focus. And so that happens. It happens constantly. It happens all the time. And therefore, when you are starting to meditate, especially when you're starting, but even as you carry through, it is recommended not to focus on one thing at the exclusion of everything else, actually. Whereas what you want to maintain is almost like a 50-50 balance, and it's a very difficult balance to maintain, but it is what you want to create at the end of the day, between being able to focus on your object of meditation while maintaining a monitoring awareness of your environment and mental distractions that are coming in. In other words, you don't want to focus like this, but you want to have focus and at the same time remain aware. And as you do that, your focus is going to become sharper because you are remaining aware, and then you notice a distraction coming in. I'm going to make a separate clip on how to deal with distractions best, but you notice them. And noticing them is the trick, because then you go like, oh, there's that little distracting thought coming in. Thank you very much. Back to the breath. And so the amount of attention that you lose away from your object of meditation is smaller, and the time and effectiveness with which you deal with that distraction is a lot more effective. So you are on your object of meditation for longer periods of extended time. And that makes the quality of your meditation by definition better. But that's because you've been cultivating both focus and awareness. How to cultivate that awareness? The focus part is something that we're going to describe in a separate video. I'll describe it to the best of my abilities and based on what I've read on some of these books. And the cultivation of the awareness part is also something that we're going to describe in a lot of detail. So in this clip, I wanted to describe mindfulness to you. It is, like I said, described both in terms of focus and awareness. In other words, you are being mindful of your environment, but you are also selecting something to be mindful of, as opposed to this just open mindfulness that has no point of focus, which is sometimes paddled around like, oh, just be in the moment. That's kind of mindfulness, but it is certainly not meditation, and it is not the kind of mindfulness that is going to make your mind power and your development as a person progress, because you could be super aware, but you could be as you know, a tiger is super aware. The other day I heard Ricky Gervais in YouTube making fun about spiders because he says they're always ready, right? Like a spider is like this, it's always ready. It's always ready to jump. And so a spider is totally mindful, but so what, right? You could be like this uber mindful person that is seeing everything on real time happening, but there's no discernment there, and then there's no power of focus. There's no ability to focus on one particular thing. So you're seeing everything as this perfect movie, and well, so what? That is one quality of mind. And in order to do meditation properly, but also to progress in your path to self-development and cultivation, you want to balance that out. So be careful with mindful paths that are only about being in the moment or only about cultivating that awareness part of mindfulness. That's not what the Buddha indicated, and not just because the Buddha says so. I don't want to argue on authority, but it is. I'll present logical arguments why that is not the only way to go. It's interesting because Eric Harrison uses that as a critique to modern mindfulness, and especially mindfulness-based stress reduction. Modern mindfulness has been defined as this just be in the moment type of thing, and it's all about just observing everything as it comes and goes. Be careful with that. It is a very seductive path because it requires less mental effort, as a matter of fact, but is going to hamper your development. So what I'll try to do as I do the evaluation and quoting of this book, which is once again the Foundations of Mindfulness by Eric Harris, is to present a more complete version of how to meditate correctly, how to develop your mind in a more rich and comprehensive way, and not to fall into easy traps that tend to be like, oh yeah, you just sit and sort of become all om, right? That's not what it's about. So I'll leave it at that for this clip. We gave you the definition of what mindfulness is, and now we're going to go a little bit further into some of the techniques. I have to say, I thought this would have been an obvious and easy book to do clips on, but it goes into a lot of detail and is very, very informative, but it's not, personally, I don't find it the easiest book in terms of its structure. I don't think it's very nicely structured, if I have to say so, but it contains a lot of good information. So as opposed to just winging it, which is what I can do with a lot of books, this one has forced me to really have to review it a little bit more carefully before I can translate it into these clips. So I hope that they become informative, and the next one I'll probably go into focusing, and the next clip is going to be about this monitoring quality of your meditation. Hope that helps, and I'll be back soon. Cheers.